Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly, sponsored by SignalWire. This week, joining us is Daniel Noworatzky, CTO at Tilla Dynamics, and an expert on everything voice over IP, especially devices and endpoints and video conferencing. Thank you for joining us today, Daniel.
Yeah, appreciate it, Luca. Thank you.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself and how you got to where you are, what your interests are, etc.?
Sure. So I've been with Teledynamics, working with them since 2006. Started out just doing sales, learning the telecommunications business. Um, Quite quickly after that, moved into support, working on PBX systems, NEC, and Panasonic specifically at that time. So learned the support side, technical side, and really had a grasp. And it was about a year or so later that all this open source technology started coming into play in about 2007. And I had some history working with Linux through my college years, and realized that it was exactly what I had been playing with in college. And so I picked up a couple of sets and picked up some premise-based PBXs that were running Linux and Open Asterisk at the time. Learned it, and we brought it into Teledynamics as a hardware distributor, and started moving it. And since then, you fast forward, and my role as chief technology officer has been to know everything about the SIP endpoints, whether that's the phones, handsets, speakers, video conferencing equipment, what have you. So my role is to make sure that we have the best vendors in the industry, and promote the best products into our channel. So it's a little bit about me and my role as Chief Technology Officer. Teledynamics has been around since 1981. Um,
Oh,
so we've been a long-standing 40-plus-year-old distributor of hardware. So we only work with certified channel resellers and installers. And like I said, our niche has been in telecom. So we started out selling analog phones and faxes and um, things like that, and moved into PBXs, and those were analog PBXs, and then it went digital, and then hybrid, and open source, and IP, and now we're in cloud hosted world. So everything that Teledynamics has done has revolved around communications over the past 40 years, and now we're in video communication as we see today.
awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's a long story. It's more than 40 years in the business. So started from rotary phones, I would say.
That's right. Some of the rotary phones, some of the specialty phones that were, the Eiffel Tower phone comes to mind, the duck phone that was a mallard wooden duck. So some of those things, some of those niche pieces, and we still have some of those today, believe it or not.
I want one of those duck phones. I I
I don't
need
know
to
about
get
one of the duck
myself one.
phones, but some of the niche phones, yeah, they're still out there today.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. So, as a part of the market and as someone who knows the market very well, do you think the market has changed over the last couple of years where things happened?
Yeah, definitely it's changed. We were running webinars in 2017, 18, and 19 pre-COVID. That the big thing that Frost and Sullivan and all the other big number crunchers were looking at is sale of phones. And they kept saying that the number of phones sold would decrease, that cell phones and computers would take over, and um, that was kind of the numbers that they kept pushing and extrapolating out into the next 10, 20, 30 years. And while that could be true on the niche digital phones, the ones that were connected to local premise PBXs on a digital scale, those sales have declined, but they have been on the other side, on the cusp of the increasing sales for voice over IP
Hmm.
SIP phones, your Polys and Galinks and Snomes and Grandstreams and Ciscos. Those sales have been on the incline. And the only thing that really caused the major influx that we see today has been COVID and that work from home environment where 90+% of the workforce globally went to work from home. And so they were all looking for, how do we take our communication in the office, take that home? And most of that was through desk sets and voice over IP handsets. Some of that would be in computers. And so we had a large increase in the need for headsets. And that was something that, it was probably in the last 5 years that the headset world kept saying, there's going to be a huge spike in need for headsets at some point in time, and that was it. So
That was true.
headsets and handsets just really have continued to be a commodity.
Yeah, I feel like so. As an aside on headsets, I've had the chance to use a professional telephony headset, not very often, a couple times, and it really makes a world of difference. So for everybody who's home and trying to work from home, I mean, I wear headphones because I do a lot of conferencing calls and I draw up and stuff. But if your job is being on a phone, I think you will agree that you do need a professional headset.
Absolutely. There's so many things that just the ability of having a headset provide. Not just to mention, the noise canceling and things like that. So if 3 years ago when people worked from home, we did have some road warriors and some people that worked out of their home offices. If you heard a dog bark or a baby cry, it was, hey, we got to stop business. Today, that's the norm. But
Yeah.
if you had a noise canceling headset throughout that, you don't even hear those background noises. So that's a big part of it. But I think the other part is as we've grown into unified communications, some of the features that these headsets offer are unparalleled today. What we had 5 years, 10 years ago, where you can link your cell phone to it and the headset itself, the physical piece of equipment here. I'm not wearing mine, I'm using a speakerphone.
Mhm.
But this piece of equipment here, you can bridge a call from your computer and from your cell phone, and you can be talking to somebody on a Skype call, Teams call on the computer, but then bridge your Bluetooth from your headset in there, or bridge it in from your telephone. So these headsets have evolved so much today that to be able to bridge calls and have people on different mediums talking through one
Yeah.
conference call just because of a headset, I mean, it's really cool.
And how's the so yeah, that's really that's certainly the first remark I want to make. Second question I want to ask you is what kind of desk phones are people getting for their houses? Are they would is there any particular model that you see selling more than others? What you'll even recommend? Like I know people were looking for something.
Yeah, so I think it really looks at the user. If it was an office user, an executive that was used to having their touchscreen panel there at the office, typically they want something similar at the house because they're familiar with it. They know how to use it. Um, on the sales side or corporate users, I've seen them. They might have had a nicer phone at the office, but they'll take home a little bit lower end phone. Especially those that are planning on moving back into either a hybrid work from home, work in the office scenario, or they plan on going back into the office soon. They've kind of had some of the lower end, medium end devices.
Cool. Well, yeah. So everybody needs a phone. I think I have one. It's been great since I got my desk phone. But there's an important thing though. With the move of workers outside of the office, these phones need to connect to something, which is the actual office. So I'm curious. You've certainly seen changes in that side too. More on that side probably.
Yeah, so we'll kind of look at this in two different breakouts. So you've had those that have had a premise PBX, so PBX that has been in their office in a back closet, networking closet. Those have had to jump up and be equipped to now have remote workers. So they've had to be connected to the network and be able to have phones remotely registered to them. Most systems sold within the last 10 years have had that capability. If they have been proprietary systems, you typically had to add a network card or a daughter board card, probably purchase some licensing for those proprietary systems to enable that feature set. But then you get into the networking piece of that of are we using VPNs? Are we
Mm.
port forwarding? So possibly there was a need to upgrade the router and firewall. Probably a need to upgrade bandwidth at some point along these last 10 years as we started moving more into that running on the backbone of internet. But that's something that we saw uh, quickly in 2020 that the sale of features, licenses, and cards to get those proprietary systems where they could handle the remote workers. And then obviously the phones that went along with that. But we've also seen this transition to hosted voice, and
Hmm.
that's where your PBX is now in the cloud, and it's we've got so many great national carriers that we work with, uh, just providing hosted voice and UCAS as a service, and that's all they do. And so a lot of these guys have pulled out the equipment from the closet, and now their PBX is in the cloud, and they're able to just hook up their desk phones, their IP endpoints at their house, at their office. You can run an app on your cell phone. I mean, so you can take calls wherever you are when that PBX is in the cloud, a little bit easier than if it were just there behind a firewall. So that's kind of one point I look at. The other point is, like I said, if you've got an app on your phone, that's great. You know, I travel quite a bit to trade shows, to partner user group conferences, even do a couple of on sites with some large dealers, and so I do have an app on my phone. I am able to take calls on my cell phone. But when everything went to work from home, you know, to do that maybe for a day or two would be fine. But you start draining the battery on your cell phone. It doesn't have the ease and flexibility of hooking it up and being able to type all day long on it. So I think people quickly saw in what I originally mentioned, some of those Frost and Sullivan charts that said, hey, cell phones are going to take over. People didn't like using their cell phones all day long when you're having to work from home for 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And so you saw this increase of sales in desk phones again.
Yeah. So I think you're right. So well, SignalWire is a provider of cloud telephony services, so we've seen an influx of those. I think you're right that at some point when you start getting into actually making your internal infrastructure available from the outside, and you never really did anything on it, the changes to make are so large, you might end up as well just moving it out somewhere else. It's
Yeah,
absolutely something I can see happening, right?
if you're not a company that is large enough to hire your own internal MIS directors and CTOs that understand networking, security is a big part of that, Luca. If you don't have somebody that's
Yeah.
hired that understands that, then yeah, you know, moving to the cloud makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it is. Again, if you have your own IT, then if you're large enough to have your own IT, you already have VPNs for other reasons. You already have external WAN like setups for various reasons.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you end up having a lot of trouble, really.
yeah.
So yeah. Well, that's yeah, I think that's a good starting point. What about companies who haven't moved to any sort of remote yet, and they sort of weathered the storm, but now remote is here to stay. So, say you were a company who haven't really made any real moves yet. Where would you start? What's the quickest way?
Yeah, that's a really good question because right now we're coming out. I say this we're coming out of the pandemic. We've kind of been in and out of it over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But you know, the companies that didn't go remote that are still here that weathered the storm. Maybe they didn't really have a need to have as much voice communications offloaded. So
Mm.
maybe their voice system wasn't offloaded, but I can promise you that the rest of their UCAS was offloaded into a remote network. Obviously, the ability to check your emails remotely, whether you're using some sort of a messaging platform, whether that's Teams or Slack or what have you, the
Yeah.
ability to have that remotely, and so that the full UCAS of sharing and even doing screen sharing and collaboration, that would have had to have gone remote for most companies. Um, you know, some of the companies that really didn't have the need to it could have been your local pizza parlor or some of those restaurants that it's kind of hard to send your wait staff and cleaning staff remote. So I don't think that they've ever gone remote, but I can promise you the ability to have some of the other UCAS there or to remote into some of the servers and run some reports remotely from the owners probably changed.
Yeah, I'm asking because I know of a few even customers who are using SignalWire services for their product, etc. But internally, they fall back to a mixture of using Google Meet and cell phone calls.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of those. But now that some people are not wanting to go back to the office, I almost feel like it's a perk a company could offer.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that you've seen, and this goes years ago when proprietary PBXs were kind of the norm. The rest of the collaboration software was kind of Frankenstein. You'd have
Oh
uh,
yeah,
this service to hang and this service to hang, but your PBX was kind of the main thing you had, and so. Email didn't really integrate with the PBX, and it didn't really integrate with whatever you were using to share files back and forth. And so
email
some of the
really didn't
companies,
integrate with anything.
exactly, exactly. And so some of the companies are doing that today where they're using a free service like Google Meet or maybe Zoom, that's the free personal service there, and cell phone calls, and they're able to get by. But I think as time moves on, they're going to see that unifying all that is really going to be extremely helpful as they grow their business. So I think that's one focus to look at there. Um, but I think when you're mentioning the path of hybrid and remote, and
Mhm.
companies that are where we are coming out of this pandemic, companies that are startups right now, they're trying to figure this out from ground zero and say, okay, where do we need to be in order to put our best foot forward? And so I do see a lot of them getting some of their initial infrastructure set now. So when they're bringing in structuring, they're making sure that they have good, solid fiber internet, and so that's kind of the base layer, and then they're adding some of their hosted services on top of that. So I do see new startup companies having that mindset up front, where 10 years ago we didn't have that true mindset of what do I need to have a hybrid work environment. And then the last thing that I'll say to that is, if you start looking in my world, as we're hiring people, and we're putting out job applications to interview, you start seeing all these applications now having hybrid or remote as an option for location. Where five
Yeah.
years ago we really didn't see that, but now it's the majority of applications have that as a location base on the application interview.
So, well, I think something that came to mind. I was reading through the various posts from your company and especially yourself, and this ties into what we're saying. So, do you think 5G is going to play a role into the full remoteization? I don't know if I'm making up the word of the workforce. Of the workforce, and where does 5G actually stand today? Because I keep hearing it's going to be here tomorrow for a while.
Sure. So I'll talk first. If we back up a little bit, just a few years back, we had the Connect America goal, and the original goal was to have um, fiber to all of the homes residentially across the country by
Oh,
2020. That was the goal, and that goal was set. I don't know, somewhere between 5 to 10 years ago in that window, and the foresight to have that pre-pandemic, the pandemic hits around 2020, we had a
mhm.
pretty good amount of that. I'd say somewhere between 70 to 80% of the coverage
Oh,
across America had fiber to the homes. Um, and so that was super important when the pandemic hit and most people had to go remote. But again, only 70 to 80%, I think, really had that. 5G plays a huge part in that, as your wireless internet service providers and WISPs, if you will, as an acronym, have really gone to bat for rural America and remote America to bring the fiber signal to the home. 5G has really been the only way to get that done. And so, even out where I live is pretty remote. And we have wireless internet service providers out here that are bringing 5G speeds to remote areas to allow rural America that connectivity. And so I do think it plays a significant role today. And I think moving
mm,
forward, as 5G rolls out stronger and it's more widespread across the country, I think you're going to see things getting even better there. The thing with 5G right now on the cellular phone side, most of the phones that were sold 2 years ago are not equipped to handle the 5G
right.
network,
Yeah.
whereas all the phones being sold today are now 5G compatible. But your wireless internet service providers, if we go outside of the commercial and talk industrially, the WISPs were the ones that were taking this signal, embedding it into what they were doing already, and just amplifying that signal to the homes. And so I think it's been very important over the last 2 years to make sure that rural America was able to connect.
Yeah. How long do you think until I won't say the rollout is finished, but we have a reasonable rollout to work with in rural
Uh,
America.
that's a great question. Right now, I can tell you the government is really trying to assist with that. And for the last couple of years, with the CAF funding to Connect America, the CAF Connect America funding. There's so many people that are taking that and pushing that to really finalize that blueprint across the country to have fiber. I would probably give it another couple of years, and as far as internet to the homes, we'll probably get there.
Not too bad. Yeah, that's a couple years is totally fine, I guess. The well, that ties into another interesting topic I know you've spoken and written on about. So with 5G, with people moving probably last and being more distributed, because at that point, why would you like to live well, unless you like city life, but then city life needs certain arrangements to be enjoyed. You're living out there. Do you think IoT is gonna really route in the homes and more than in industries? Because I feel like right now IoT is really just for some industrial processes, and it's not even really leveraging the new connectivity, the new things that are being deployed, 5G especially. Like I don't see IoT as going. This is my personal opinion. I haven't seen IoT move in a while, to be honest. Doesn't look like anything fancy is happening. Where we were promised flying cars, quotes, but they're not
Yeah.
here.
I kind of look at IoT out of two lenses, if you will. I look at it as what is it doing industrially, but also what is it doing commercially? Because I think the commercial side and what everyone has today with their Androids and iPhones is pushing the envelope of what IoT can do. Everybody today now can turn on their ice maker in their refrigerator with an app. They can turn on and off lights and things like that in their houses, at a consumer level. And that consumer envelope, I think, is pushing the industrial envelope of IoT, where you could see, I could set at my home, I could set my thermostat, and I could have all my lights go on just when my car hits a GPS fence, and geo caching how close I am to my house, that the thermostat can change to the setting I want, the lights can come on, and I don't have to touch a thing. That's pushed the envelope in the industrial world, because commercially, you had to go through and flip light switches or something now.
Yeah.
But we've installed motion sensors in some offices, and that was probably 5 or so 10 years ago, and that's kind of helped evolve there. But now I think, because of that consumer uh, niche that has grown, even with Ring doorbells, things like that, people
Oh yeah.
are wanting the IoT software. That I think that's helping push that commercial industrial envelope to go, okay, how can we take that and put that on a greater scale, where you can control uh, an entire college campus, if you will, through IoT. And so we're starting to see some of that. We're starting to see some of the development of that process. And I think that envelope's being pushed. I think at the consumer level, people are touching it every day on a small scale.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, from when you're an engineer, you were intrigued by flashy technology. It's fair
Yeah,
to say, and you probably know how developers are, right? So if we
yeah,
like the new shiny stuff, but you're absolutely right. It's not just the big shiny ideas, but it's also the everyday that's probably driving more innovation. That's absolutely true. I
yeah.
feel like 5G though is going to be instrumental in that, mostly because IoT devices have very little processing power, while the edge deployments in 5G can give you as much power as you need. So effectively, it's going to be a big backbone and
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. Absolutely. In anything that takes place outside of the brick and mortar walls of a office, you're going to have some sort of a 5G connectivity out there, whether that could be camera deployments. It's kind of what I see a lot going on right now. There's some amazing softwares going on with camera deployments that are put outside a building to help with the security internally. There's no wire being ran out to that camera. This is all running off of 5G now. And so that's one that I see quite frequently. And some of the software that you can put into the IoT there, where the camera is able to pick up things that come into, again, kind of like a geocached. They can draw a square around the parking lot, and if a car comes
Wow.
into the parking lot, that's when it kicks in, and then it alerts you across the 5G network saying, "Hey, somebody's in your parking lot." But it doesn't pick up things like trash blowing across the parking lot, because there's different settings you can filter against that. And so I think IoT is getting there. It's growing. And I think you're 100% right, Luca. The 5G backbone is only going to amplify that, make it better, because now we're going to connect more people to that and have those hardware devices that the IoT software is running on be able to transmit that signal.
I mean, in our field, one of our fields application, when you're doing speech recognition, voice activation, that kind of stuff, uh, embedded devices generally can only work with a limited subset of commands. But to actually understand speech, you either run a bigger device, which is more expensive, or you can just offload that to an edge deployment, so we can see more sophisticated IoT devices without increasing cost too much, because this is a microphone and a network, and it will just do whatever it needs to do, while you used to be able to need to bundle stuff on top of those. So they're really just sensors and a network card at this point,
Yeah, I'm seeing
which
a
is
lot of neat stuff going on with that. Like you said, the sensors are already out there, the microphones are already out there, cameras are already out there, and there's some IoT software they're using right now, especially with cameras. Cameras have kind of been one of those things that just sit out there as an endpoint, like door access control. You go up there, it sees you, you push a button, you talk to a receptionist that's inside the building, they let you in. Other than that, that camera just kind of sits there all day long. And there's some really neat companies out there putting some IoT software together to where that camera can be used to scan for gun safety, for example. That's
oh
one of the
wow.
things that they're using it as a proactive way of looking for active guns on school campuses and things like that. So IoT is getting there. It's really neat to see what they're coming out with. But again, that backbone of 5G, you're 100% right. It's taking these things that are outside that really don't have connectivity in some cases, and amplifying that signal to where it's gonna allow it to work with IoT software.
The active shooter example is really interesting. I added that. It's
Yeah,
I can
yeah,
see that. I can see how that would work. Like, actually, not too hard. Well, it's very hard and has to be done properly. But there's
right.
nobody walking around with a gun on a school campus. So if you can detect someone has a gun in their hands, chances are something bad is going on. That's totally true. Would be
Yeah,
different if it were a military base, right? How would you
yeah, that's
find
right.
out?
It'd be going off all the time, wouldn't it?
But it's if it's a situation where that's really an anomaly, it is, and I can see that happening in a few other situations. Like, what I'm thinking is, it's not even an example, just something I thought about right now. It could be something where you have something like an elderly person, and you trace their daily patterns of behavior, etc. If something, without having a camera, I don't know, maybe accelerometers, the kind of stuff. If something is really different for a while, you can fire off an alert, whatever that is. They move really fast and then they stop. Ooh, maybe they fell down or something like that. It's actually very, very interesting. As a that's probably going to transform healthcare and that kind of sectors too. Knowing that people, unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say unfortunately. I mean, I live in Italy, so Italy has this thing where everybody has large families. They all live more or less not together, but adjacent houses or
Right.
different floors of the same building, and it's no longer like that anymore, even here. So a lot of people who are older live alone. That's really, and I think telephony in general is also going to play a big role.
Yeah, I think healthcare, that vertical in the United States, we've really seen some. We've seen some growth on the telecom side of it with the teledoc is what it's kind of known by here, where now you can have a video conference call from your cell phone into a doctor's office, and see a doctor face to face across a video conference. And so if we're running that on patients' cell phones, what do you think the backbone needs to be there to make sure that we can get that
Oh
more
yeah.
widespread? You're talking 5G again.
Otherwise, yeah, well, we're all video experts here, me and you, and certainly I wouldn't be able to do a medical diagnosis on some crappy 3G signal
Right.
somewhere nowhere in nowhere land, knowing that to start with the camera might not be great because not everybody has an iPhone 13 Pro Max Super Turbo. They're just, some people have what's called affectionately called as potato phone in the video streaming industry. And those are that
Yeah.
you have to cut it. So if at least the bandwidth is stable, a doctor could probably still figure out something. If there's no bandwidth, there's no phone that's going to save you, even if you have a super camera, right? Yeah, it's very important. Last remark I want to make about healthcare and being close to people is voice over ap also is helping people in that area. Like, it's easier to call your mom. It's easier to be I know people were using a simple tablet or whatever to stay on the phone with their parents maybe all day. They don't really have to talk all the time, but they're just connected, and it's cheap or free traffic, and they're
Yeah.
so that 5G is going to help there too, because there's more bandwidth for everyone. Because if everybody was on a video call all the time, we'd have no internet at the moment. We've seen that happen, actually.
Yeah, we've seen that happen even with local schools and districts where they went to work from home and had some of the teachers were at the school launching their Zoom calls initially when schools closed down, and were having bandwidth issues because you had 60, 70, 80 teachers each in their own room trying to launch uh, video calls, and the bandwidth couldn't hold up to that because they hadn't been doing that previously. So we've learned as a community and a society in the last 2 years, what is it really going to take to have a backbone, even from a local level to a national level, global level, to support this kind of video calling, and we've only seen video grow, and it continues to grow if you just keep watching Microsoft Teams and Zoom and what their expected growth is over the next 3 years. We know video is the fastest explosion in telecommunications right now. So obviously, yeah, I think we're seeing the ground level work being laid for that
Yeah.
infrastructure.
But it's very interesting that what you bring up about the school. I've seen that happen at offices too, where everybody
Sure.
was trying to connect to the same system and download the files for the day and whatever. And we realized most of our internet connections are not really that much bandwidth. It's just that it's usually one person doing normal work or whatever. But it's at home, everybody. I mean, I have two daughters, and at one point, so I generally work from home unless I'm traveling. My wife was teaching from home, and my two daughters were trying to get on Zoom calls, Google Meet calls, whatever, on at the same time. And at some point, we had I so before I got a Starlink connection, which helps a lot. But before that, I had normal internet because we have no fiber in the area. And at some point, we had to decide which one of us had to jump on 4G, which will give us less quality, but at least will allow the others to keep going. It was usually me because
Yeah,
it's because we I mean, I'm better at managing, so it was usually me, but it's even just in houses. So yeah, that's
yeah,
bandwidth is going to be where everything else starts. No bandwidth, no,
that's right.
no nothing.
That's right, and like I said, 5, 10 years ago, that wasn't the focus, especially at the home level. Um, but as we've seen in the pandemic right now, for new companies, new businesses that are saying, "Hey, we're starting, we're a startup, we're going to go now," it is on the top of their mind now. I think the installation base, the MSPs, have really done well with that communication, saying, "Hey, this is something you need to focus on and actually look at." 5 years ago, it really might not have been at the top of their mind and priority, but today it is.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, thank you, Daniel. So we had a great chat. We went through many things, from which devices you need, how to set up your home network, 5G bandwidth, companies, how to get started. There's a lot of knowledge here. So I'm sure if you have any other questions, I can forward them to Daniel, and we can put you in touch if there's anything the audience would like to know. For now, I would like to thank Daniel Noworatzky, Chief Technology Officer at Teledynamics, for joining us today.
Thanks, Luca. I will just end with this. If you're looking for some more good information, you prefaced it earlier. We write a weekly blog, and you can find that at info.teledynamics.com/blog.
And I have to say, I went there to look for a few conversation points and ended up reading multiple articles because it's just great. So thank you so much. It's a great starting point.
Appreciate
And
it.
well, again, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. And
Yep.
for the rest of the audience, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks.